Ethan had never imagined his life would take him to the grand palace of the alien queen. It wasn't the kind of thing any person would willingly agree to, but it was part of an agreement his government had made with the alien species. Humans were useful allies, and the aliens expected certain things in return. The palace was enormous, with towering spires that reached higher than any structure Ethan had ever seen. The walls shimmered with alien technology, and the air smelled of strange flowers that seemed to glow in the dim light. Ethan felt out of place, standing in the middle of this vast hall. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. Certainly not someone who belonged in the royal chambers. Queen Lyra stood before him. She was beautiful, but it wasn't just her beauty that made her stand out. There was a power in her presence that could almost be felt in the air. She wore a flowing gown made of a material that seemed to change color with every step. Her eyes were a deep, glowing blue, and her skin shimmered with a soft, golden hue. It was clear she was a ruler, someone not to be disobeyed. Ethan had heard stories about her. The queen was known for her intelligence, her strength, and her cruelty. She ruled over millions of planets in the galaxy, and her people respected her above all else. But there was something more about her that Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on, something dangerous. He was here for a very specific reason. The queen had requested a human mate to help her race, to ensure they remained strong and powerful. Ethan wasn't sure why he had been chosen. There were far more qualified candidates, after all, but it didn't matter. It was an order He entered the royal nesting chamber, a room bathed in soft light. He tried not to let his nerves show. His heart raced, but he kept his face calm. Lyra was waiting for him, standing at the center of the room. Her eyes locked onto his the moment he stepped inside. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. "Come closer." He hesitated, but obeyed. There was no turning back now. "You're here to serve me," she continued, her voice soft, but filled with authority. "In return, you'll be treated with respect. You will help me fulfill my duty to my people." Ethan nodded, but inside, he was screaming. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to be part of this royal tradition. He had his own life, his own future. But this was what his government had agreed to, and he had no choice. He had to follow through. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she took a step closer. She reached out, gently brushing her fingers against his arm. Ethan stiffened, but he didn't pull away. Her touch was light, almost teasing, as though she was testing him. "You're different from the others," she said, her voice dropping to a softer tone. "You're not like the others who come here. You have something I can't quite explain, and that intrigues me." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure what she meant. He was just a man, a soldier with no special qualities. Had no idea why the queen had singled him out. He didn't even know why he had agreed to come in the first place. Lyra took another step forward, her presence overwhelming. "Do you know what you are here for?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "I'm here to help you, Your Majesty," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Whatever you need." She smiled, but it was cold, calculating. "Yes, you are here for more than that. Are here to give me what I need to secure my future, my people's future." Ethan felt a wave of unease wash over him. The queen's beauty was undeniable, but there was something about her that felt like a threat. He didn't know if he could trust her, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she stepped even closer. "I'm sure you know the customs of my people," she said softly. "We do not mate for love. We mate for strength, and you will be the one who strengthens me." Ethan swallowed hard. He had heard of the queen's cold, clinical approach to reproduction. The aliens didn't believe in romance or emotions. They believed in survival, in creating the strongest offspring to rule their empire. Ethan had been chosen as a suitable candidate, though he didn't know what that truly meant. Lyra took a deep breath, and then, without warning, her lips met his. It was a soft, gentle kiss, but it held an underlying force. Ethan's body reacted. Before his mind could process it, the queen's power was overwhelming, and despite his best efforts to remain composed, he felt his resistance weakening. She pulled back, studying him closely, her fingers brushing against his cheek. "You'll stay here, Ethan. You won't leave until my needs are fulfilled. Do you understand? He nodded, unable to say anything else. His mind was clouded, and his body felt heavy. Lyra's presence was like a magnet, pulling him in. But as she turned away, her back to him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Queen had chosen him for a reason. He wasn't sure if he could escape the consequences of what was about to happen. As he stood in the royal nesting chamber, Ethan realized one thing. He had just entered a world far darker and more complex than he could ever have imagined. Ethan sat in the grand chamber, his mind racing. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The kiss, the Queen's touch, it all felt surreal. His body had reacted against his will, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had never planned on becoming part of her world, let alone giving her what she needed for her species. But now, with everything unfolding, it felt like there was no escape. He had expected resistance, coldness, even anger. But instead, Lyra's touch had been gentle, almost tender. It was a side of her he hadn't anticipated, and it unsettled him. The Queen was a ruler, strong and untouchable. Yet in that moment he saw something different in her eyes. Was it desire, or was it just power? Ethan's head was still spinning when the doors to the chamber opened again. Lyra entered, her presence commanding, her regal gown sweeping behind her like an unstoppable force. Her eyes met his with a knowing look, and she didn't waste any time. "You are still here," she said, her voice smooth but with a trace of something else. "I thought you would leave, but you chose to stay." Ethan stood up slowly, not sure what to say. He had never been good at dealing with situations like this. He wasn't an ambassador, not someone who could smooth things over. With a few clever words, he was just a soldier. His instincts were telling him to keep his distance. "I didn't know what to expect," he replied, his voice quieter than he meant it to be. "This is all too much. I'm not ready for this." Lyra raised an eyebrow, a faint smile on her lips. "You're not ready? But you're here, aren't you?" She stepped closer, her every movement graceful, almost hypnotic. "You're not just here by accident. My people have chosen you, and now you have a role to play." "I didn't ask for this," Ethan said, frustration rising in his chest. He wasn't sure whether to be angry or afraid. "You're not the only one who didn't expect any of this. I didn't come here to what?" Lyra interrupted, her gaze intense. "To refuse? You can't refuse. You don't understand the importance of what we're doing here. The future of my people depends on this. It's not just a decision I made on a whim." Ethan clenched his fists, trying to keep his calm. He had been thrown into a situation that felt beyond his control. He had no choice but to go along with it. But what if he couldn't? What if he couldn't be the person they wanted him to be? Lyra's voice softened, as though sensing his conflict. "You think I want this, Ethan? I don't. My people expect me to be strong, to lead them to a future. But the truth is, I am just like you. A person trying to do what's right, even when it doesn't feel like it's in my control." There it was, again the vulnerability. In her voice, it was unexpected, almost out of place in the cold, calculating Queen. Ethan wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. Was this a moment of honesty, or was she manipulating him? He wasn't sure. She continued, her tone still softer, though her eyes never left his. "I know this is difficult for you. I'm not forcing you to stay, but if you choose to leave, remember that there's no turning back. Once you leave this chamber, you will never be the same, and neither will I." Ethan looked at her, his mind a swirl of thoughts and emotions. The Queen was powerful, yes, but there was something in her eyes that made her seem more human, for lack of a better word. The fierce exterior, the command, all of it was beginning to fade, replaced by something deeper. He wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it a game to her, or was it real? He wanted to say something, anything that could make this make sense. But all that came out was a sigh. "I don't know what to do. This is all new to me. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel." Lyra studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then, with a small smile, she stepped back. "It's not about what you're supposed to feel. It's about what you're willing to do. You may not understand it now, but this is part of something bigger. And no matter how you try to run, You're already part of it. Ethan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Was she threatening him, or was she speaking the truth? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. The moment he entered this palace, it stepped into a game with rules he didn't understand. Lyra turned away, her gown flowing as she moved to a nearby table. She picked up a device and activated it. A holographic map appeared, showing different star systems, planets, and fleets of ships. "This is the future of my people," she said, her voice hardening again. "We will continue to grow, to expand, to thrive. But that future relies on you, and I will not let you walk away from it." Ethan's eyes followed the map. It was an impressive sight, showing the vastness of Lyra's empire. And yet it was clear that there were cracks beneath the surface. He didn't fully understand what Lyra needed from him, but he knew one thing: his life would never be the same again. He was already caught in her world. Whether he liked it or not, for the first time, he understood that he wasn't just a pawn in this game. He was a player, and the rules were about to change. The days that followed were filled with tension. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the Queen from his mind. He had always heard of her in whispers, spoken of as a ruler of unimaginable power and beauty. But now that he had met her, he knew. She was much more complicated than anyone had let on. Queen Lyra was not just a monarch, she was a force of nature. But in their encounters, there was something about her that had begun to confuse him. Beneath the fierce exterior, there was a strange vulnerability. He had seen it in her eyes, felt it in her touch. Yet he couldn't tell if it was a weakness or a carefully crafted illusion. Lyra had told him that he would never be the same once he left her chamber, but he had never expected the true consequences of his actions to come so quickly. One evening, as Ethan was trying to clear his mind in a quiet part of the palace, he was called to the royal council chambers. The invitation was terse, no room for questions. His presence was required immediately. When he arrived, he found Lyra standing before a group of her advisors, her posture regal, her face tight with concentration. She didn't look at him when he entered, but he could feel her eyes on him. The moment the doors closed behind him, "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "this is a matter of importance. The future of my people is at stake." He nodded, though he felt uneasy. "What now?" Lyra turned to her advisors. "Leave us." The advisors hesitated, but then filed out of the room, leaving the two of them alone. Only then did she speak again. "You know what you've done?" she asked, her voice sharp, though her gaze remained cold. "Do you know what your presence here has triggered?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm not sure what you mean. You think you can simply walk away from this, don't you?" Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. "You think that I can simply forget what happened in my chamber? That this is something I can just erase?" Ethan's heart pounded. He had tried to put it all out of his mind, tried to act like it didn't matter. But deep down, he knew he could never forget. He had crossed a line, and now he was facing the consequences. The Queen's voice softened, though the anger didn't completely fade. "I have a responsibility to my people, a responsibility I can't ignore. And now, because of you, I'm fertile." The word hit Ethan like a shockwave. "Fertile," he repeated, not fully grasping the meaning. "But that wasn't supposed to happen, right?" Lyra nodded, her eyes darkening. "No, it wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. My species has a strict process for reproduction. We are not meant to become fertile on a whim." This, she took a deep breath, fighting to stay calm. "This is a mistake, but it's one I cannot undo." Ethan stood in silence, processing her words. He had no idea how this had happened. But the Queen's words made it clear that it wasn't just a personal issue anymore. It was a matter of survival for her people. Lyra turned away, looking out at the city beyond the palace walls. "If word of this gets out, it could destabilize my entire empire. The council would never accept it. They would see me as weak, as someone who can't control her own body." Ethan could sense the weight of her words. This wasn't just about her anymore. The fate of an entire civilization hung in the balance, and his actions had somehow played a part in that. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Ethan said, his voice low. I know, Lyra replied, still facing the window, but it has. Now I have to deal with it. There was silence between them, the weight of the moment settling in. Ethan felt helpless, unsure of what to do. What could he do? He wasn't a scientist or a royal advisor. He had no idea how to fix this. But then, Lyra turned back to him, her eyes softening just slightly. I've been told I am not allowed to show weakness, that I must be perfect, but this. She paused, her voice faltering just for a moment. This is beyond my control. Ethan could see the cracks in her armor. Despite her powerful position, despite the empire she ruled, she was still human in some ways. And right now, she was scared. Is there anything I can do? He asked quietly. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment, the anger and coldness faded from her expression. It was as though she was seeing him for the first time, not just as a tool to use, but as a person. You've already done something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've changed everything. Ethan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to run, to disappear from the palace and pretend none of this had ever happened. But the other part of him knew that wasn't an option anymore. He had been caught in this mess, and there was no way out. Lyra stepped closer, her presence filling the room. Can't undo what's been done, Ethan, but we can face it together. My people will demand answers. They will demand a solution. And I have to decide how to handle it. Will I embrace what has happened, or will I fight it? Ethan didn't have an answer. He wasn't the one in charge here. Wasn't the one with the responsibility of an entire empire on his shoulders. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to some sort of decision. You will stay here. You will face this with me. And together, we will find a way through it. Ethan didn't argue. It seemed that he had no choice but to follow her lead. Staring at the queen who had once seemed so untouchable, he realized that nothing would ever be the same. Whatever came next, it would change both of their lives forever. The days in the palace grew longer, and the weight of the situation pressed down on Ethan's chest like an invisible force. Lyra had made it clear there was no turning back. Her people were already questioning her, and the whispers had started to spread. Ethan was at the center of it all, whether he wanted to be or not. He had tried to leave, tried to walk away from the mess he had found himself in, but Lyra's words echoed in his mind. Once you leave, you'll never be the same. And there was truth in that. He knew that now, Lyra's emotions were unpredictable. One moment she would be cold and commanding, the next she would show a side of herself that Ethan wasn't sure was real. The vulnerability she had shown him in private was nothing like the queen who stood before her council, regal and unyielding. He had seen her struggle with her power, seen her question the very system that had brought her to the throne. And it made him wonder, was she truly the heartless ruler everyone believed her to be? But those thoughts were interrupted when one of Lyra's advisors came to find him. Ethan, the advisor said, his voice low and urgent, you need to come with me. Without a word, the advisor led him down the winding corridors of the palace, through hidden passageways, and into a small room filled with monitors. The walls were lined with large screens, each showing different locations throughout the palace and beyond. Ethan's stomach sank. He knew what was happening. The hunt had begun. They've found you, the advisor said, his eyes darting to the screen. Lyra has given orders to search for you. Lyra, Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why? The advisor turned to face him, a look of concern in his eyes. You've become a symbol now, a problem that needs to be solved. The council demands answers. It's only so long they can hide the truth. Ethan was silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Lyra had told him that if word spread, her position would be in danger, and now it had. It was the cause of her instability. And that instability was threatening everything she had built. I don't understand, he said. I didn't ask for any of this. The advisor gave him a sharp look. It doesn't matter what you want anymore. You're part of this now. You're tied to her fate. Ethan clenched his fists, frustration rising. He had always known that being a soldier meant being part of something bigger, but he had never imagined that something bigger would involve an alien queen's empire and a crisis of galactic proportions. "Where's Lyra?" he asked. The advisor hesitated. "She's in the council chamber. It's preparing for the confrontation." "What confrontation?" Ethan demanded. "With who?" The advisor's gaze shifted to the monitors. "With anyone who stands in her way." Ethan's heart raced. Lyra wasn't just trying to hide what had happened. She was about to fight for her empire's survival, and he was caught in the middle of it. "You need to leave," the advisor said urgently. "Lyra has ordered a search. If they find you, there will be no escaping the consequences." Ethan stared at the advisor, torn between the desire to run and the knowledge that running wasn't an option. He couldn't just leave Lyra to face the storm alone. It's not when he had played such a significant role in bringing it upon her. Before he could make up his mind, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. The advisor's eyes widened in panic. "You have to go now," he urged, his voice filled with urgency. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He turned on his heel and ran, moving quickly through the palace's labyrinthine corridors. His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. Where could he go? How could he escape when the palace was on high alert? As he moved, the palace seemed to close in around him. The walls that had once felt like a safe haven now felt like a cage. Every shadow seemed to hide someone looking for him. He couldn't outrun Lyra's power, and the more he tried to distance himself, the more he realized that there was nowhere he could truly hide. But then, a strange thought hit him. What if he didn't need to hide anymore? What if, instead of running, he faced the truth? What if he stood by Lyra, even if it meant risking everything? He had spent so much time running from the situation, trying to avoid the consequences, but maybe it was time to stop fleeing. Maybe it was time to take responsibility for his role in all of this. He paused at a crossroads in the hallway, his mind made up. If he was going to be part of this, he was going to do it on his own terms, with determination. Ethan turned back toward the council chamber, the place where everything had started. He knew he couldn't avoid it any longer, whatever was waiting. For him there, he had to face it. As he approached the council chamber, the doors swung open before him. Lyra stood there, her back to him, her hands resting on the table in front of her. The council members were seated around her, their faces a mix of judgment and skepticism. "You've come," Lyra said without turning. Her voice was low, but Ethan could hear the tension in it. "I'm not running anymore," he said firmly. Lyra's shoulders stiffened as she slowly turned to face him. Her eyes locked onto his, a mixture of surprise and something deeper in her gaze. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying an edge. Ethan nodded. "I'm with you, whatever happens." For the first time since he had arrived at the palace, Lyra smiled. It was small, but it was genuine. It was the first sign of something other than anger and coldness. And in that moment, Ethan realized that his fate was tied to hers, no matter how much he had tried to fight it. Together, they would face whatever came next. The council chamber was silent, save for the murmurs of the advisors seated around the table. The air felt thick with tension as Ethan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Lyra. He could feel the weight of the moment. The stakes were high, and his presence here was no longer just an unfortunate accident. It was a declaration. Lyra stood tall at the head of the table, her usual confidence tempered by a flicker of uncertainty. The council members watched her closely, their faces betraying nothing but suspicion. Ethan knew they were waiting for her to command them, to assert her authority over the room. But Lyra wasn't the only one who had to make a decision. He had to make his own. Lyra's eyes met Ethan's as he stepped closer, and for the first time since he arrived at the palace, there was no coldness in her gaze, only a kind of raw honesty. It unsettled him, but at the same time, it made him feel as though he had made the right choice by staying. "Ethan," Lyra said, her voice steady but with an edge. "You've come to face what's coming. Are you certain about this?" "The council won't make it easy for us." Ethan nodded. "I'm not running anymore. If we're going to deal with this, We do it together. Lyra's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile. She turned her attention to the council, whose eyes were now on her. We need a solution, she said, her voice sharp and commanding. The situation we're in is unprecedented. People demand answers. They want a clear path forward. One of the council members, an older alien with silver-gray skin and piercing green eyes, spoke up. And what do you propose, Your Majesty? You have a human in your chamber, and now you're claiming that this mistake could endanger the future of our empire? What solution can be found now? Lyra's gaze hardened. Edamon, I will decide what's best for my people, not you. The council members straightened, but he didn't back down. Cannot allow such a disruption to go unpunished. If your actions have jeopardized the stability of our empire, there must be consequences. Ethan could see the tension in the room rising. Wasn't sure if they were angry at Lyra or at him, but he knew one thing. The queen was fighting for her position, not just for her people, but for herself. We all have a choice now, Lyra said, her voice quiet but firm. We can either accept what has happened and find a way to make it work, or we can destroy everything we've built. There was a long silence as the council members exchanged looks, clearly torn. Ethan could see the doubt in their eyes, and for a moment he felt like an outsider. He wasn't supposed to be here, and yet here he was, standing at the heart of the conflict. Another council member, a younger alien with smooth violet skin, spoke up. What if we use this to our advantage? She asked, her voice cautious. The human's presence has already caused a stir, but perhaps we can leverage this situation. Could it be possible to use his role to unite the people? Ethan blinked, surprised by the suggestion. He had never thought of himself as anything other than a pawn in someone else's game, but now he was being asked to be part of the solution. He glanced at Lyra, waiting for her response. Her eyes softened for a moment before she nodded slowly. That's an option, but we must be careful. The risks are high. I won't have my people turned against me because of one mistake. It's not just your mistake, is it? Ethan said before he could stop himself. All eyes turned to him. This is about all of us. If we're going to fix this, it can't be just about you or just about me. It has to be about the future. Lyra's expression softened for a moment, and she gave him a small nod. You're right, she said quietly. We're in this together now. The council members were watching them closely, and Ethan could tell that their next move would shape the future of the empire. This was no longer just a matter of survival for Lyra, it was about the survival of an entire civilization. Lyra turned to face her advisors. You have a decision to make, she said, her voice strong once again. If you choose to stand with me, you will stand with Ethan as well. I will not turn my back on him. And I will not let this empire fall because of fear or old traditions. There was a long pause, and then one by one, the council members nodded. Some more reluctantly than others. Ethan could see the resistance in their eyes, but he also saw something else, a recognition of the truth in Lyra's words. The future of the empire wasn't just about maintaining power or keeping up appearances. It was about finding a way to adapt to a changing world. Lyra's gaze moved over the room, settling on each of her council members. Then we move forward, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. We will face whatever comes next together. As the council members began to murmur among themselves, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since he had arrived on the alien world, he felt like he might actually be a part of something meaningful, something bigger than just surviving. Lyra stepped down from the podium, her eyes meeting his. Thank you, she said quietly, for staying. Ethan wasn't sure if he was truly staying for her or for something else. Maybe it was the fear of running away again. Maybe it was the unexpected connection they had formed. Whatever it was, he knew one thing. He had chosen to stand with her. I'm not going anywhere, he replied, and as they walked out of the council chamber together, the future seemed a little less uncertain, even if the path ahead was still unclear. The days following the council's decision were filled with uncertainty, but there was also a quiet sense of resolve. Ethan couldn't ignore the fact that things had changed. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, forced into the Queen's world. By some political agreement, now He was an active participant in shaping the future of an empire. And though the weight of that responsibility hung heavy, he knew there was no going back. Lyra, too, seemed different. Her posture had straightened, her presence had grown stronger. She had made her choice to stand with Ethan, to accept the consequences of what had happened, and to face the future together. And while the council had agreed to support her, there were still those who watched closely, waiting for any sign of weakness. There were still dangers ahead. Ethan found himself in the palace's garden one evening, trying to clear his mind. The lush greenery surrounding him was a stark contrast to the tension inside the palace. He could hear the faint sounds of the city beyond, but here, in this peaceful place, he could finally breathe. "You seem distant," a voice said from behind him. Ethan turned to see Lyra approaching, her steps soft but purposeful. Her eyes were filled with that familiar intensity, but there was something different in them now. There was a warmth that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking," Ethan replied. "About everything, about what's next." Lyra walked up beside him, standing in the quiet garden, her gaze drifting across the stars. "We all have our part to play in the future. This isn't just about you or me. It's about all of us. Together." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure if he fully understood what that meant yet. He hadn't asked for any of this, but here he was, caught in a web that stretched far beyond his control. He could no longer see a clear path forward. But he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't running anymore. "What happens now?" Ethan asked. Lyra took a deep breath, looking at him with those piercing blue eyes. "Now we build a future. We work together. We show my people that there's more to leadership than power. Show them that we can adapt, that we can change. That the future doesn't have to be shaped by the mistakes of the past." Her words rang with a quiet authority, and for the first time, Ethan felt like there was hope. He hadn't been sure what to expect from Lyra when he first arrived, but now, standing beside her, he saw something in her: a determination, a willingness to evolve that made him believe in this impossible future she spoke of. "The council," Ethan said, hesitating. "They still don't fully trust me. Do they?" Lyra's expression shifted slightly, her eyes narrowing with thought. "No," she admitted. "There are those who still doubt. They think I've made a mistake, that this situation is too much to bear. But that's their fear talking. Fear of the unknown. Fear of change." "And what if they try to fight back?" Ethan asked. The idea lingered in his mind. The council had agreed for now, but what if that changed? What if there were factions within the empire that didn't want to see things change? Lyra turned to face him, her gaze steady. "Then we fight. Not with weapons, but with resolve. We prove that the future is worth fighting for. Together." He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since he had entered the palace, he believed in the possibility of change. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of something bigger, something that had the potential to reshape everything. They stood there in silence for a moment, letting the calm of the garden wash over them. The quiet was comforting, but there was a restlessness beneath the surface. Neither of them could ignore the challenges ahead, but for the first time, they both seemed ready to face them. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said quietly. "I've made my choice." Lyra looked at him with something that resembled gratitude, but her expression remained serious. "I know. I'm glad you're here. I can't do this alone." They didn't speak for a while after that, each of them lost. In their own thoughts, Ethan knew that what they had started wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a long road, filled with opposition and doubt, but he also knew that they couldn't give up now. They had come too far. The silence was broken by the sound of footsteps. A messenger approached, holding a scroll in his hand. He bowed before Lyra, his eyes briefly glancing at Ethan before he handed over the message. Lyra unfurled the scroll and read it quickly. Her face remained unchanged, but the tension in her posture was unmistakable. She handed the scroll back to the messenger without a word. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "A report from the council," Lyra said, her voice steady. "There are more who are questioning my leadership. They've called for a vote to determine whether I should remain on the throne." Ethan felt a cold sense of dread wash over him. Lyra's gaze hardened, and for a moment, she looked every bit the queen she was. It means we have a choice. I won't let them decide my fate. I will fight for what's mine, for what's right. Ethan nodded. Then I'll fight with you. Lyra's expression softened just slightly. I know you will. But this fight will be more difficult than anything we've faced before.
Oh.
Council will not be easy to sway, and there are those who will never accept the changes we've made. We'll face it together, Ethan said, his voice firm. Lyra gave him a small smile, the first real smile he had seen from her in a long time. Together. The messenger left them. Lyra and Ethan stood side by side, their fates tied too. Each other in a way neither of them had fully expected. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but they were no longer facing it alone. And as they stood there, looking out over the distant stars, the future no longer seemed quite so impossible.